So, in Wrath of the Triple Goddess, Percy goes on a shadow traveling excursion with Hecuba, and he talks a bit about his past experiences with shadow traveling. He obviously talks about Nico, but there's one particular line that doesn't make sense. Percy says that he used to shadow travel to Florence to get Christmas shopping for Annabeth, and he just remarks that it was a long story without going into any further detail. So we scoured the original series, the Heroes of Olympus, the Demigod Diaries, the Demigod Files, and even the Singer of Apollo to figure out what the heck Percy was talking about. Rest assured, after much searching, we did eventually find this mysterious adventure. The lost story of Percy Jackson has been recovered, and we can't wait to tell you about it. The story in question is called Unat Mezzasangue. And yes, you heard that correctly, it's Italian. You'll have to forgive my pronunciation, my experience with Italian is with music terms. In 2020, during the height of the COVID pandemic, Rick Riordan wrote a short story for the people of Italy who were hit especially hard during the coronavirus. And this is where we find Percy's misadventure with Nico. But the story itself is no longer on Rick Riordan's official site. We did, however, find a copy, and it shows Percy and Nico coming across the Etruscan god Charo, who is the last of his kind. When they arrive in Florence, Percy remarks that it seems nearly abandoned. Shops are closed down, there's a heavy fog over the city, and everyone is sequestered inside. And we find out that demigods can't get sick with COVID, but they can still transmit it. So he and Nico wear masks and social distance just to be safe. Nico leads him down to one of the shops where they encounter Charo, who is described as a withered god with wild white hair and a scraggly beard, with the ears of a lynx, large tusks, and a long vulture beak. He has wide red wings that Percy initially believes are a coat, and he actually mistakes Charo for Santa for a brief moment before he turns around. But despite his appearance, he is not a hostile god. Long before the Romans took over the region of modern-day Italy, the Etruscans worshipped their own pantheon of gods, but we learn in the last few millennia all of them have faded except for Charo, the Keeper of Death. He describes his role as being the protector of passage into the underworld, and he personally escorted all of his friends into the afterlife. People can leave their most valuable possessions in his protection while they move on to the afterlife to ensure that they are safe and secure, and so over the years he has collected an archive of different trinkets and valuables. Charo, however, always remains behind because death does not end, and so he will seemingly never be able to retire since he is dutifully committed to protecting the Etruscan passage into the underworld. And in all of his years, only one individual has ever passed through his domain and come back. He references Dante, from the novel Dante's Inferno, who is the only mortal to have ever passed through the underworld and return in one piece. What's interesting here is that he seems to be operating a shop, so the valuables that people leave him don't stay in his possession forever. When Percy first comes in, he's in the middle of repairing a diamond necklace, so it seems like Charo does sincerely take care of the artifacts left in his possession and takes great care to clean and fix them before allowing them to be passed on to someone else. When Percy describes Annabeth, Charo comes up with an idea and presents him with a gift that once belonged to Cephalus, the Etruscan god of craftsmen and metalworking. Here, it's important that we clarify the only document we have access to is a rough English translation, so we don't know what the original Italian word for this item is. It's said to be a gold bracelet made of tiny keys, but whether this means a keychain or a literal ring made of keys is not quite clear, since again, the original text is no longer available on Rick Riordan's website. If anyone has access to the original Italian version and could shed some light on what exactly this is, that would be greatly appreciated. But we interpret it as a keychain since Charo says that the keys can open doors and solve problems. If the keys can be used, then we think it's logical that they're on a key ring and that the translation is just a little funky. And Charo says that it can solve a great many problems, perfect for a strategist like Annabeth. As far as we can find, Annabeth doesn't actually ever use any of these keys, so we don't actually know what the keychain was used for or if it will come up again later down the line. But in Wrath of the Triple Goddess, confirms this story to be canon. Then it's possible we might see it pop up again in the third book of the College Admissions trilogy. As payment, however, Charo asks Percy why an Etruscan god like him should be interested in celebrating Christmas. After all, the Romans had come into his territory, usurped him and his friends from their roles as gods of the region, and let them fade away. Year by year, more and more of his friends asked him for passage into the afterlife as the Roman gods ruled their new kingdom, until eventually the same thing would happen to them. We know that the Roman gods shifted with the balance of power and ended up in England and then eventually migrated over to North America, but they were still usurped by a new, younger religion, the very same religion that pioneered Christmas to begin with. Percy, who isn't great at being ambushed with philosophical conundrums, actually comes up with an answer that embodies the entire message of the story. He talks about the universality of hope and connection, and how Christmas is a time to remain hopeful no matter where you come from or what belief system you follow. It's a season of generosity, and Charo ends up liking Percy's answer, but this speaks to exactly why Riordan wrote this story in the first place. It was published in December of 2020, and as we mentioned before, Italy was hit particularly hard by the COVID pandemic. So this story was published to the pages of La Repubblica as a reminder to hold strong while Italy was going through a difficult time. It was meant to be a message from Percy to the people of the real world that they were almost through the worst of it, and that they needed to remain hopeful that things would turn around. For a while, we weren't sure that the story even existed, and those that did know about it weren't sure if it was canon to the events of the larger universe, but now we seem to have confirmation that these events did actually happen. We know that the Etruscan gods are all but gone, and Annabeth that has a set of keys that might play a role going forward. But given how small and short the story was, we aren't holding our breath to see these keys in action. Most of the fanbase would have no idea where they came from, and wouldn't have easy access to the origin story even if they wanted to go back and find them. We had trouble finding the story, and the only text that we did end up finding was a loose English translation that wasn't released by Riordan or Hyperion Publishing. So there's no reasonable expectation that fans should know about the keyring. For this reason, we believe in-universe the keys are more of a puzzle toy, something to keep Annabeth's brain busy without any earth-shattering ramifications. Basically, we think he got her the demigod equivalent of a Rubik's Cube to play with. At least that's our own personal headcanon until we find something more confirming or disapproving of this idea. But we're not confident we'll ever get a follow-up. The story wasn't particularly groundbreaking or action-packed in any way, but it was a nice way to spend a few minutes with Percy and Nico as they inspire the people of Italy to remain hopeful. But that's why Percy said that he went Christmas shopping in Florence with Nico, and what happened exactly. What do you guys think of this story? Are any of you from Italy? And if so, did you read Unat Mezzo Sangue when it first came out? And is there any more insight you can offer since most of the official sources no longer seem to be active? As always, don't iris message and drive, drink your nectar, and stay safe, demigods. We'll see you in the next one.